Okay. Part 4. The Archduke Conference approaches. Having been advised to learn about the old technologies before selecting what new thing was best, Brunhilde began interrogating Riarda in detail about outfits of the past. It didn't take long for the two of them to become rather invested in the discussion, particularly since they cared much about more about fashion and accessories than most. Even Feline and Lazletta started to listen to Riarda's speeches with interest. As I watched with a warm smile, Audley entered with a letter of invitation. Lady Rosemine, Ob Ehrenfest has summoned you for a tea party at Fifth Bell today, she said. Now that we had returned and all the Archducal family was in the castle, we will be holding a tea party to primarily discuss the upcoming Archduke Conference. Since this was going to include talk about the printing industry and the infrastructure of the lower city, Elvira would also be in attendance. Although the letter had only just arrived, Ferdinand and Sylvester had ironed out those plans through ordinances while we were at the temple. So I had already expected the meeting. It is only natural that you and Lord Wilfrid are going to be present, as you have begun attending the Royal Academy, but I see that Lady Christine will also be Lady Charlotte... Why am I saying that? I don't know. Lady Charlotte will also be attending. Under normal circumstances, a noble would only begin apprentice work after entering the Royal Academy. Those who had just finished their baptism would help their parents work, hear about work life from their family and friends, and consider their future so they could choose their course from the Royal Academy when the time came. Charlotte, however, was destined for the Archduke candidate course, and since she actively wanted to work with us, she was being included in the printing industry. Charlotte is working as hard as the rest of us, so she must attend as well, I explained. Her retainers would no doubt find themselves in quite the troublesome situation if she alone were not kept up to speed, do you not think? Audley placed a hand on her cheek and sighed. I am worried about how both Lady Charlotte and you are neglecting your bridal training duties to focus on this printing industry, among other things. Charlotte was working with almost manic desperation to avoid falling behind Wilfrid and me as an Archduke candidate. However, considering that Wilfrid and I were now engaged, the next Archduke was all but set in stone. It seemed that Audley and Charlotte's attendants had been discussing how they wished we would focus more on preparing to be brides. Sorry, Audley, I'm 1,000 times happier being busy with working than preparing to be a bride. As unfortunate as it was for all our attendants, what I cared about most was reading. I was putting my all into spreading the printing industry so that I could one day retreat into the darkness and read to my heart's content, but as for bridal training, I could never care enough to take it seriously. Lady Rosemine, shall we head to the meeting room? Lazletta asked once she had finished preparing for our leave. I was going to be accompanied today by Riarda and Lazletta as my attendants, and Cornelius, Lenore, and Judith as my guard knights. Hartman and Feline will also be joining me as my scholars, so they briskly gathered their stationery together. I climbed into my pandibus and drove to the meeting room, which was on the second floor of the castle's main building. I'm so nervous about attending a meeting with the entire archducal family. I'm just a lay noble, Feline said, carrying her stationery with trembling hands. I'm an archnoble, and even I'm tense, Hartman said, his expression somewhat stiff. This is also going to be my first time attending a meeting with everyone from the archducal family. Lazletta gave a smile that reminded me a lot of Angelica. I am anxious myself, but we need only perform our duties with diligence, she said. All we apprentices are expected to do is our very best. I thought the only thing Lazletta and Angelica shared was their looks, but their attitudes toward work are pretty similar too. Attendants and guard knights had different jobs, but they resembled each other in how they took full responsibility for their work and performed all the duties expected of them. Angelica maintained a strict delineation between tasks she was willing to do and those which required her to think. When it came to her guard duties, she was twice as serious as anyone else. Lazletta was likewise frighteningly observant and considerate, especially with Riarda respecting her abilities and putting so much effort into training her. It was easy to overlook, but she always prepared what I needed, usually before I even realized that I needed it. Isn't that a second or a first-rate attendant right there? Only one guard knight could enter the meeting room, so Cornelius followed me inside while Lenore and Judith waited in another room. A crowd had already gathered in the meeting room. The archducal couple sat in the highest seats, with Bonifacius and then Ferdinand sitting next to them. Wilfrid, Charlotte, and I came next, and we all took our scholars and scholars and guard knights with us. One attendant was also hurrying about preparing tea, so even though this was only a meeting for those affiliated with the archducal family, it was still rather packed. Elvira, higher-up scholars, and higher-up of the Knights Order were here as well. There you are, Rosemine. I hear you were finished with the ceremonies without incident, Sylvester said. He gestured me over, and so I approached with Cornelius. My scholars and attendants had their own work to do. You seem rather tired, Sylvester. I was seeing him up close for the first time in quite a while, and I couldn't help but notice that he looked more exhausted than I was used to. There were bags under his eyes, and his smile exuded a little less energy than usual. On second thought, perhaps it was more accurate to say that Sylvester seemed calmer than I was used to. The hyperactive man who normally acted like an elementary schooler now felt more like a white-collar worker, drained from having served a middleman between his juniors and higher-ups. I knew this would happen the moment we decided on your engagement to Wilfrid. It's not important. How'd you spend your time in the temple? Outside the ceremonies, the same as usual. I practiced whirling in the Harpspiel, then helped Ferdinand with his work. Outside of that, I received reports from my attendants on what occurred in my absence, held meetings with merchants, and toured the orphanage. I also prepared important magic tools needed for the royal outfits we are preparing, and even secured some reading time. They were very freeing and productive days, I said. On the whole, I was pleased that I had finally been able to relax a little, but Sylvester just grimaced. So you didn't get any time to rest at all. You're working too much, he muttered. Florencia smiled at Sylvester. She agreed with me and said that he needed to work harder to match my pace. Sylvester nodded and then turned his attention back to me. Thanks to that intel you gathered in the lower city, it seems that we'll be able to avoid bringing shame to Ehrenfest after the Archduke Conference. I owe you one. After saying that, Sylvester gently stroked my hair, which was a little weird considering that he normally mussed, and then told me to return to my seat. It seemed that he had sent me to the temple not only to distance me from those in the castle, but to give me a break. Wow, he was affectionate. Who would have thought? Your attention, this emergency meeting on our future plans for Ehrenfest will now begin, Sylvester announced. Ehrenfest, which had for years been stuck at the bottom of the rankings despite being a middle duchy, was finally garnering more influence. Sylvester explained that reasonings for this, that our written grades were improving due to the studying taking place in the winter playroom, caught the attention of the sovereignty and the greater duchies during the interduchy tournament, and that the rose mine compression method was due to greatly increase the amount of mana in the next generation of children. During the interduchy tournament, we received business requests from all other duchies, Sylvester continued. We exchanged vows with Klausenberg and the sovereignty, promising that we would establish deals with them for hairpins and Rensham during the coming Archduke Conference. It has all been inevitable that Ehrenfest will be doing large-scale trade with other duchies from this point onward, but we have rarely accepted so many visitors before, and we do not have the infrastructure to support outside merchants. Elvira, if you would. By your leave. Immediately upon receiving the command, Elvira stood up and started to explain with documents in hand from how our lower city compared to the lower cities of other duchies, as well as how we were decades behind them. I knew this already, but it was important to make sure that we were all on the same page. Lord Wilfrid and Lady Charlotte investigated the matter using information Lady Rosemine acquired from the lower city, and they discovered that the lower city's infrastructure was ultimately neglected due to mana shortage. We need to correct this before the merchants come following the Archduke Conference, Elvira concluded. Sylvester stood back up with a nod. If a course of action exists that will improve the disastrous state of the lower city, we must take it. I went to investigate the place myself while under the same assumption that a city of commoners will end up laden with filth no matter what. They can't use magic tools, so I was convinced that their conditions were inevitable, but this isn't the case in other duchies. Their lower cities are as clean as their nobles' quarter. The vast majority of nobles living in the nobles' quarter refrained from entering the lower city. They would summon merchants to them for business matters and soar over the city on their high beasts when traveling. On the few occasions when a noble did need to travel to the lower city via carriage, they would simply express their shock at the filth and hold their noses until they were through. It was hard to ignore what a terrible state Ehrenfest was in when one heard that the lower city of other duchies were comparable to our nobles' quarter. From what I recalled, the guildmaster's letter hadn't gone as far as to say these lower cities were as clean as our nobles' quarter, but Sylvester had probably decided to exaggerate the truth in order to convince the more hard-headed of scholars. We must make good on the debt accrued by all those decades ago, Sylvester declared, a noticeable sharpness in his dark green eyes as he looked across the room. We will use the mana we've stored up to cast Entwickeln and rebuild the lower city's infrastructure before the Archduke Conference. This decision is set in stone. Entwickeln, I wonder what Sylvester was referring to, but it didn't take me long to figure out it was the official name of the Extreme Makeover. Entwickeln on the lower city, came a scholar's voice. Do we have enough mana for that? Asked another. Surprise and uncertainty surged through the room. In that moment, the archducal couple exchanged a glance and then nodded at each other. It seemed they had decided between themselves to make this extreme makeover happen no matter what. This is an order from Ob Ehrenfest to the archducal family, Sylvester declared. Offer up your mana for the sake of our duchy. Ferdinand was the first to move, crossing his arms in front of his chest to express his obedience. Bonifacius followed suit. I did the same, and then Wilfrid and Charlotte copied us a beat later. Sylvester nodded, having acquired the approval of every member of the archducal family. It was decided that Entwickeln Wickeln, the creation magic, I'm just going to say, was going to be used. We now needed to iron out the more minor details of our schedule. We must inform the lower city of our decision, one scholar noted. Indeed, we'll need to momentarily expel the commoners, another said in agreement, but this was much easier said than done. Would it even be possible considering all the furniture and food that commoners would have? I couldn't help but frown as I pictured my own family being chased out with a ton of luggage on their backs. Were all nobles expelled from the nobles' quarter when it was renovated, I asked. What did they do with their furniture? Lord Bonifacius, if you recall what happened at the time, would you kindly share with me what you know? Excited to be speaking to his granddaughter, Bonifacius did just that. He explained that in order for the nobles to have toilets and baths added to their homes, they had needed to submit the blueprints to their estates to have them altered or remade before the creation magic was performed. It had been quite the ordeal, since everyone had needed to bring all their furniture outside onto the gardens of their estates. To complicate matters, we are dealing not just with ivory buildings here, but also the wooden stories the commoners have constructed themselves, a scholar mused. I am unsure of how to deal with them. We don't have the spare mana to turn those extra floors into ivory too, Sylvester replied, his arms crossed. These numbers are purely for remodeling the existing ivory buildings. In short, while it was possible to remodel the bottom 2 stories made out of the ivory stone, doing so would cause the upper stories to collapse. Casting the creation magic would destroy a lot of people's homes. If we allow those upper stories to collapse, the streets are going to be flooded with homeless citizens, I protested. The majority live in those wooden extensions, while the stone sections below are used for workshops and stores. Furthermore, many workshops are currently working to create the products the incoming merchants intend to purchase. If we shut them down for a long period of time, we will not have the products that sparked this entire issue. The potential losses are much too great. Having merchants from other duchies coming to Ehrenfest only to find massive refugee camps and no products to buy was pretty much the worst-case scenario. Ferdinand listened to my concerns, stroking his chin all the while, and then offered a solution to the matter. Although we are using this thing again, there is no need to treat the lower city exactly the same as the nobles' quarter. Rather than adding toilets and baths to the inside of every building, as was done previously, we could add several communal places where the commoners can dispose of waste, like those ours in the temple. This would avoid the need to alter the buildings themselves. Oh, so that's how the temple handles things. The more you know. Yeah. I pretty much left everything to do with temple life to my attendants, so not once had I wondered how the waste there was dealt with. Apparently there were spots for tossing water, and these used the same slimes used in the nobles' quarter. If there was a way to solve this without touching the buildings themselves, that would be ideal, I agreed. Your suggestion would also greatly reduce the mana expenditure, will it not? Ferdinand responded with a frown, keeping an eye on Sylvester to see his reaction. It would be possible to create an underground sewer system beneath the roads without touching the buildings, he said. If we create places to dispose of waste and then have commoners bring their waste there rather than tossing it out the windows, it would be possible to create a sewer system without destroying any houses. And however, in order to maintain cleanliness, the commoners will need to be taught personal hygiene and the good sense not to litter in the same way that those in the temple have been taught. The temple looks great, so that sounds good to me, Sylvester said. Indeed, Ferdinand replied, and if orphans are able to adopt such habits, surely commoners will manage too. It will depend on how they are taught, and that is a problem, Elvira said with a sigh, being the person in charge of dealing with the lower city's infrastructure. Cleaning things up once with the creation magic was simple, but getting commoners to keep things that way was going to be much more of a challenge. It seems like a job for Gustav. He has a lot of influence in the lower city, right? Sylvester asked, turning his eyes to me. I was more familiar with the lower city than anyone here, and everyone knew that I got emotional when it was mistreated. In other words, he was instructing me to come up with a good idea for the lower city's sake. I paused for a moment and thought. I believe that Gustav's word as the guildmaster will suffice for the majority of the city. The north has the richest commoners and the largest stores, the west has the markets, and the east has the travelers, all of whom will no doubt listen to him. The people in these areas will take the remodeling quite seriously, since defying Gustav's will would result in fines, withdrawn approval to run stands in the market, and a ban from submitting business applications to the guild. The problem is the south, I continued. The rich rarely go to that area of the city in the same way that we rarely go to the lower city as a whole. And although there are many craftspeople there, I am uncertain how much of a message from the guildmaster will spur them to action. I wasn't sure how they would want to spread the word through Craftsman's Alley and all the poor apartments, nor how they wanted to punish those who refused to comply. Dad, help! Oh, how about using the soldiers, I asked, clasping my hands together in realization. All eyes scattered on me at once, and Sylvester in particular gave me a searching look. By soldiers, you mean the commoner guards at the gates? He asked. Correct. The guards I hire when sending priests to Haas's monastery have informed me that the soldiers' duty outside of guarding the gates include patrolling the city and preserving the peace. Furthermore, since the majority of the guards live in the southern area of the city, if the knight commander takes charge, the soldiers will do everything from teaching the people, ensuring the practices are upheld, and ensuring they are last into the future. Instructing people to do something once likely wouldn't be enough to make it a regular part of their everyday lives. They needed people to remind them over and over again, using the fact that it was an order from nobles to scare them into complying. It would be more effective to have friends and family filling those roles than a more distant figure like the guildmaster. The Knight Commander already has meetings with the soldiers, I continued. We need to only tell them about the date and time we'll be casting the creation magic. They can tell the citizens to hide in their homes to minimize disruption for us. Not a bad idea, Sylvester said. He glanced at the higher-ups from the Knight's Order, and they nodded in response. It was decided that the scholars would inform the Merchants Guild, while the Knight's Order would inform the soldiers. Ehrenfest, since we have saved our mana costs, could we not only have tubes for disposing of waste, but also tubes for purifying and moving water, I asked. Papermaking and dyeing both needed a lot of water, and this requirement would only increase as the industries grew larger. Perhaps we could draw water from the large river to the west? Ferdinand, what do you think? Sylvester asked. Could we use water-purifying magic tools on the river? In the long term, it would use far too much mana. The magic tools would need to be redesigned to be usable. However, if the water will only be needed in the future, perhaps we could add only the pipes for now. Those alone would not be a significant burden. Sylvester nodded. He then instructed the scholars to recalculate the mana expenditure and prepare blueprints for using the creation magic before moving on to the next matter at hand. Next up, questions and requests from the Merchants Guild. They want to know how to distinguish between merchants from duchies that have permission to do business here and merchants from duchies that don't. Other duchies apparently have large-scale magic tools that even commoners can use, but will struggle to make them before the merchants arrive. Any ideas for how to handle it? My creativity left much to be desired, so the only solution I can come up with for distinguishing the merchants was the red sealed letters I had considered previously. I tried describing how the system worked. Not a bad idea, but we'd want something unique to Ehrenfest, Sylvester said in response, or at least something that can't easily be copied. In that case, what say we use non-set paper to mimic the so-called red sealed letter system, Ferdinand suggested, looking up from where he was seated. He explained to everyone that Ilgner's newly developed non-set paper had a particular quality that meant any large ripped-up pieces would slowly crawl back together. The scholars widened their eyes in surprise, having known about plant paper but not about paper made from face plants. If each is dyed with the respective duchy's colors, with the Merchants Guild having one half of the sheets and the duchies the other half, we could immediately identify which merchant is from which duchy, I said. We can tell the merchants of other duchies to keep their halves and mana-blocking bags so they do not move on their own. The paper for merchants would end up sliced into smaller bits, or the half-sheets in the Merchants Guild would inevitably end up larger. Ferdinand said that putting a restriction on the size of the paper would prevent them from sending too many merchants. These sound less like red sealed letters and more like verification slips, but okay. This is a fitting method for us to use, since we hope to soon move on to selling plant paper as well, Florencia said with a smile. Given that merchants from other duchies will not easily be able to fake these papers, I see no issue with us using them. Sylvester nodded. All right, buy non-set paper from Ilgner and make sure it's ready for the Archduke conference. Father, or rather, Ob Ehrenfest, Wolfried interjected. I think it'd be wise to buy normal plant paper along with the non-set paper so that we may have the scholars use it during the Archduke conference. His voice cracked as he spoke, and his rigid expression as he looked across the room made it clear how nervous he was about speaking here. Rosemine used a lot of plant paper in the Royal Academy for transcribing and taking notes, which I am told generated a lot of interest among the citizens of other duchies. Perhaps we should do the same during the Archduke conference? Everyone stared at Wolfried in surprise, keeping their silence, having not expected him to speak here. He took a short breath as he endured their gazes, then pressed his lips together, trying to steady his nerves. Moments passed without anyone making so much as a sound until, Everyone looked toward the source of the interjection to find it had come from the High Priest himself. It may be somewhat expensive to have scholars use plant paper at the Archduke conference, but it is easier to write on and will save us a tremendous amount on luggage costs, Ferdinand said, expressing his support for the idea. It will also be a good way for us to market our products to other duchies. It is worth considering. Wolfried suddenly looked a lot more at ease than before, perhaps relieved that his idea had been accepted. I see. If we wish to spread plant paper, we must set an example by using it ourselves, Sylvester said. It will consider it. In addition to this, Wilfrid added, I think we should all have all those attending the Archduke Conference use Rensham and all the women wear hairpins, so as Rosemine did at the Royal Academy. Doing so will draw much attention to our duchy. You certainly learned a lot at the Royal Academy, didn't you? Florencia said, accepting her son's proposition with a smile. Wilfrid smiled at her in turn. It went on to discuss some more of the finer details, such as what recipes to introduce at the meetings held over meals during the Archduke Conference, how many more business partners we would be able to take next year, and how we would sell pound cake to the other duchies we couldn't do business with this year. And with that, the meeting came to a close. It was agreed that I would remain in the castle until the week before spring prayer. It was also my responsibility to inform Wilfrid and Charlotte where they would need to go and in what order so they could prepare for the trip. This time, Ferdinand's attendants were going to be accompanying them. The locations had been assigned as per our earlier discussion, I said. I see that your schedule is much shorter than the other, sister, Charlotte noted. That is because I will be using my high beast, which halves the number of days I will have needed to spend traveling. It isn't that I have less to do, of course. I can just go to multiple places in a single day. Can I speed up my schedule too then? Wilfrid asked. I'm afraid not, brother. Huh? My high beast is a drivable one, and I can make it so that there's enough room for the Grey Priests and Shrine Maidens with the chalices. Your high beast, in contrast, is a rideable one that only holds a single person. Even if we had the same high beast, I can't imagine your retainers would want to ride with your Grey Priests, would they? They were shocked enough to voice their surprise when I said I would be letting the Gutenbergs ride in mine. Since spring prayer could not be performed without the chalices, one could not get through their schedule quicker without being able to fly with the priests who carry them. My guard knight Daniel had gotten used to me flying with my attendants after spending so much time in the temple, but those serving Wilfrid would probably be against flying with orphaned Grey Priests. And those aren't the only problems either. You and Charlotte lack the mana required to perform multiple blessings a day, do you not? You're right. They were currently performing the blessings by using face stones infused with my mana. It wasn't something that I really understood since I had never done it myself, but using someone else's mana was apparently more tiring than using one's own. I have more mana than stamina, so I'm prioritizing finishing spring prayer as quickly as possible, I explained. I'll be bedridden in the temple for some time afterward, so in practice we will most likely be occupied for the same number of days. I had gotten a lot better since the Jarif, but I will still probably end up bedridden when all was said and done. Wilfrid and Charlotte both frowned at the same time like they had something to say about how my plans literally accounted for me ending up in such a state. Sorry, but there's no point denying reality. Gotta plan around it. The day after we discussed spring prayer, I had a tea party with Florencia, Elvira, and Charlotte. As Ferdinand had instructed, I needed to report to Florencia and Elvira about our printing plans since they were the heads of our factions. I needed to show that I can remember to do what I'm told, and so I reported that the Gilberta Company would be reviving old dyeing methods with the Dyeing Guild, and that a competition centered around it would be held at the end of summer. Behold, I have remembered to keep people up to date with what I'm doing. Even I can grow. As I puffed out my chest and showered myself with praise, Florencia widened her eyes in confusion and placed a hand on her cheek. Why is this event being held? I'm not sure I see the connection. It just kind of happened. I blinked and everyone had already agreed to it. Lady Rosemine, you must be more clear when giving reports, Elvira said. She was smiling as she spoke, but the intensity in her eyes made me recoil in fear. This may be of use to you, Lady Rosemine. As if on cue, Feline stepped forward from behind me, holding out the dying-related documents she had compiled from Fran's report. She truly was a well-trained scholar. I took the reports and passed them to Florencia, who immediately began reading them alongside Elvira. It seems that many in the lower city envy the dramatic success of my Gutenbergs. Thus, the Gilberta Company suggested that it would be wise for me to use this opportunity to select a dyeing workshop or two to give my exclusive business, I explained. It is normal for a noble to pick workshops to favor, but my goodness, sister, everything always ends up so dramatic when you are involved, Charlotte said. According to her, a normal noble would pick their workshops based on introductions from their parents, or their family members, or from their friends. It certainly wasn't standard practice to give every single workshop the same job and then pick one's favorites from among them. Once she had finished reading the documents, Elvira returned them to Feline and then looked at me, her dark brown eyes sparkling with excitement. Since this is happening regardless, I would like to see these dyed pieces of cloth myself. When the end of summer approaches, let us call the Gilberta Company here and discuss the results, or the details. I feel like Mother getting involved is only going to make this even more dramatic, but I guess that's fine. Despite that thought crossing my mind, I pressed my lips together and refrained from vocalizing it. I really have grown. The next day following the tea party that had granted me an opportunity to really feel my growth, I needed to meet with my retainers to discuss Schwartz and Weiss's outfits. It was important that we settle on the design soon and order the cloth from the Gilberta Company. Liesletta and Brunhilde were at the center of the discussion since they had poured more passion into the designs than anyone else. I also allowed Charlotte to join since she seemed rather interested. Her retainers in particular had been squealing alongside Liesletta in the Royal Academy dorm, so I could imagine they were having fun. Cornelius and Hartman, in contrast, awkwardly moved to stand in a corner and sit at this meeting out. I don't blame them. Lady Rosemine, rather than giving Schwartz and Weiss matching outfits, I would like to dress them as a boy and a girl, respectfully. Would that not make them look far more adorable than they are standing next to each other, Liesletta said, her dark green eyes gleaming as she extolled her position with clenched fists. Her usual reserved self was nowhere to be seen as she raved on about how cute shoe mills were and how much she was looking forward to making these clothes. I welcomed her enthusiasm since I wanted someone who would gladly handle all the embroidery for me, but I was at the very same time stunned to see how differently she was acting. I do not mind the idea, but will you be able to handle the increased workload it will require, I asked. We will need to think of not one, but 2 ways to embroider the magic circles on their outfits. I do not mind, I will pour my all into this. Liesletta really is Angelica's little sister. She's making the same expression Angelica did when we presented with my minor compression method. Despite how differently they usually acted, I could feel an unmistakable bond of blood between them. As I worked to contain my laughter, the other girls were already chatting about the clothing designs. The sleeves need to be short so they don't get in the way of Schwartz and Weiss's work. That's too bad. At the very least, let's decorate them with lace. We will need to think about where to put the embroidery. Since I was planning to give Schwartz and Weiss library committee armbands, I tried suggesting a sailor suit and a gakuran, the kind of school uniforms worn by students in Japan. I drew up the design, and Angelica helpfully added the magic circle designs to show what the clothes would look like once the embroidery was done. Now the school uniform looks like a biker's jacket. It's not cute at all. I see that magic circles greatly change the feel of an outfit, I observed. This is not at all as I imagined it. Schwartz and Weiss certainly need cuter outfits, Liesletta said, and the others agreed, turning down my designs in a heartbeat. For my next suggestion, I proposed maid and butler uniforms. It was a simple combination, a dress with an apron versus a skirt, vest and pants, so it didn't receive an instant rejection. This should suffice for the basic design, Liesletta said. It looks nice. For the shorter sleeve, I believe it would be cute to puff them up, another girl replied. From there, the discussion among the attendants continued. Will the new dyeing method be used on these outfits? The cloth is going to be finished at the end of summer, but that won't leave enough time for the embroidery, will it? We could save the dyeing for only the small accessories. As they continued their excited chatter, I slipped out of the group and went to read a book. My plan was to listen from a distance. These girls were so passionate they would certainly produce something cute with or without my direct involvement. Could we perhaps make the clothes black, the color of the sovereignty, and then embroider the apron and vest? That way we could have them change dresses and blouses to different ones. Good idea. We shall dye the scarf using the new method and then clasp it with an Aranvest hairpin. As for the hairband, let's make it with flower ornaments rather than cloth. Would that not be wonderful, like a crown of flowers? For the male outfit, we can clasp the chest with a flower ornament. They pulled their ideas together and ultimately decided on cute folksy dresses for the both of them. My butler and maid combination was nowhere to be seen. They're still cute, though, so I suppose it's fine. Lady Rosemine, please dye the embroidery thread and the cloth for the apron and vest with your mana as soon as possible. We shall get started on the embroidery right away. We will struggle to finish in time if you do not select the cloth before you leave for spring prayer, Liesletta said, organizing all the opinions of the girls. I believe it would be wise to call the Gilberta Company over tomorrow or the day after so that we may select the cloth together. How does that sound to you? You may do what you think is best, Liesletta. Liesletta was about as skilled of an apprentice attendant as I could ask for, and she displayed her talents by summoning the Gilberta Company over the next day and masterfully selecting the best cloth for the job. Once again, I simply read during the meeting and gave my approval at the end. Please take the cloth and thread we ordered today to the temple. My workshop is there. Understood, Karina said, leaving with our orders. We were one step closer to finishing Schwartz and Weiss's outfits. As I sighed in relief watching the girls swell with excitement, Audley gave a calm smile. Lady Rosemine, Lady Charlotte, perhaps you should use this valuable opportunity to practice your embroidery. Charlotte and I exchanged glances before shrugging at each other. I'll keep going. Spring prayer in the Central District. Once it was the week before spring prayer, I was scheduled to return to the temple. Fran and the others were handling all the necessary preparations, so I was just there to make any final checks. Selecting those who would accompany me, preparing the food, organizing carriages, preparing the guards, and managing the orphanage during our absence. They were all used to it by now, and so almost everything was already complete. Although those from the planting company were going to be preparing our carriages, they wouldn't be accompanying us themselves this time. They had their hands full getting the Gutenbergs ready for Haldensdale and making arrangements for the creation magic that was going to follow. It seemed the scholars had already sent their messages, and from what Gil had told me, the lower city was in something of a panic. I wrote letters to the Gilberta Company, the Planting Company, and the Merchants Guild describing the details of the creation magic and the system plan for distinguishing merchants, and noting that Elvira was going to be participating in the dyeing competition. It was information they had probably already received from the scholars, but I sent the correspondence anyway. Benno had told me the more sources one had for their information, the better. Lady Rosemine, the cloth and thread from the Gilberta Company has arrived, Zom informed me. What shall we do with it? I needed to dye the cloth and thread of my mana, so I had asked for them to be delivered to the High Bishop's chambers in the temple. I needed Ferdinand to come to my workshop before I could get started, though, since I didn't have any ingredients of my own to use. Zom, please inform the High Priest that there are materials I wish to dye, and arrange a meeting. I would like to have all this done by spring prayer. Ferdinand agreed that it would be best to leave as much time for the embroidering as possible, and the dyeing was completed in no time at all. Incidentally, I tried using wash-in for cleanup again, this time controlling my mana so as to not drown anyone. Angelica, please deliver this to Laysletta and the others, I said, sending the dyed materials to the castle alongside sheets of paper with the magic circles drawn on them. Once that is done, I will grant you time off until spring prayer, since you will not have time to rest while guarding me throughout the journey. I thank you ever so much. I will draw my own designs and prepare threads so that I can embroider my cape during the trip. It sure sounds girly for her to be killing time with embroidery, but don't be fooled, she's doing it to boost the defensive power of her armor. After I watched Angelica happily fly away from the temple, Daniel looked down at me with a dissatisfied frown. You're always soft on girls, Lady Rosamond. Oh, funny thing is, I was watching, I think, Trash Tier Waifu's video for this volume, and I was looking down at the comment section, and this actually came up for poor Daniel in his search for a wife. But you're the one who said you were, fine taking your break after spring prayer. I took all of your opinions into account before making my decision, I said, my brow furrowed, but Daniel just shook his head. I'm not talking about the time off. You immediately granted Angelica's wish to embroider her cape, but you still haven't found me a marriage partner. Didn't you promise to ask Lady Elvira about it? Will my future betrothed be introduced to me at the Starbind ceremony or something of the sort? Honestly, I forgot to ask. I knew it, Daniel exclaimed. He collapsed to his knees, despair written on his face. I hadn't realized just how eager he was to get married. Sorry about that. I'll ask Mother later. Are you going to forget again? Daniel asked. Life was apparently hard for bachelors when the Starbind ceremony approached. Right, I actually needed to remember this time. I sent Daniel's pleas to Elvira by ordinance before I forgot, and a number of days later, it was time for spring prayer. Lady Rosamond, I am relieved to see you well, Dad said, having come early in the morning with the platoon of guards who will be heading to the Haas. The wrinkles under his eyes conveyed that he was getting older, but the love in his gaze was as strong as ever, and seeing it warmed my heart. I could also see the soldiers lined up behind Dad, looking clearly glad that I was well. I apologize for worrying you all. I am quite fine now. I shall trust the guard to Gunter once again. Thank you for your service. You may count on me. Grey priests and apprentices climbed into the carriages to switch places with the 3 grey priests we were bringing back. Hugo and Gil were already inside, so as I understood it, I saw them off praying for their safety on the road, and then went to prepare for the spring prayer this afternoon. After lunch, I changed into my ceremonial robes, then moved by high beast with Fran and Monica like always. Once Daniel and Angelica were ready, it was time to go. There are fewer places to visit this time, which should place less strain on your body, Ferdinand said as he saw me off. And with that, I soared up into this air in Leslie. Angelica was sitting in the passenger seat this time. A smile touched her lips as we flew over Ehrenfest. This is my first time doing guard duty outside Ehrenfest, she said. Are we going to be fighting strong Fae beasts? We will be visiting the mansions where commoners live over the winter. I have no plans to visit anywhere strong Fae beasts might appear. What? But how will we gather ingredients then? Unfortunately for Angelica, who had evidently wanted to gather ingredients, deviating from the plan to do something dangerous would have comically severe consequences for me. It wasn't going to happen. Why did you think we would be gathering ingredients? I asked. The face stone that Daniel was going to give Bridget wasn't from the castle forest, so I thought he had gathered it while on guard duty for a ceremony. I thought for sure that the ceremony was an ingredient collecting adventure filled with Fae beast hunting. No, that was only for her to reeve. The first half was surprisingly accurate, but the second was completely wrong. The ceremony certainly wasn't an ingredient-collecting adventure, as she had put it. This ceremony is about refilling the land of mana, I explained. Oh. Fran and Monica let out chuckles from the back seat as Angelica visibly deflated. They must be surprised to hear that someone thought ceremonies and ingredient collecting were the same thing. I can understand why their bafflement would turn to nervous laughter. Angelica, that is the city of Haas. The ivory building there is the monastery where we will be staying tonight. It didn't take long at all for us to reach Haas. Even from high up in the air, we could see the enormous crowd gathering in the plaza before the Winter Mansion. The people began making an opening so that we could land. It's Lady Rosemine, the High Bishop! Haas welcomed us enthusiastically. I climbed out of Leslie and was immediately approached by Rick, the city's mayor, and the local town chiefs. They all looked a little different than I remembered. In fact, one of the town chiefs was a new person entirely. Oh, one of them died or retired or something. We have been eagerly awaiting your return ever since those in the monastery informed us that you had awoken late, High Bishop, Rick said. I nodded at his greeting and then had Fran carry me to the stage. My robes would have gotten dirty otherwise since the ground was muddy. It also would have been unthinkably shameful for me to step on my hem and fall over. Oh yeah, definitely. Fran set me down on the stage and prepared the chalice. Meanwhile, I expressed my thanks to the people of Haas who were gathered in front of the stage. I am told you have all taken good care of those in the monastery during my 2 years of sleep. Thank you. I shall express my gratitude to Haas. As enthusiastic cheer ran through the crowd, I waved to them, after which Fran picked me up and set me down on the table. I confirmed that the 5 town chiefs had climbed up on the stage with lidded buckets about 10 liters in size, then reached out to the chalice. O goddess of Waterflew train, bringer of healing and change, O 12 goddesses who serve by her side, the goddess of earth Geduld has been freed from the god of life, Abiglabe. I pray that you grant your younger sister the power to birth new life. I offer to you our joy and songs of glee. I offer to you our prayers and gratitude so that we may be blessed with your purifying protection. I ask that you fill the 1,000 lives upon the wide mortal realm with your divine color. I poured mana into the chalice as I prayed, causing a glowing green liquid to flow out from within. Fran tilted the chalice, pouring the liquid into the lined-up town chiefs' buckets. After the ritual was over, I spoke with Rick about what had happened over the past 2 years, and when my little sister Charlotte came up, I made sure to brag about her. A lot had apparently piled up, and I stood up after hearing the gist of it all. I am relieved to know that Haas has gotten back on its own 2 feet, I said. Now I must visit the monastery as well, considering it has been 2 years since I was last there, if you'll excuse me. The people of the monastery are no doubt just as eager to see you, Rick replied. Please bring peace to their hearts. With the people of Haas seeing me off, I flew to the monastery by high beast. Upon our arrival, Fran and Monica opened the monastery door, allowing the Grey Priest and Shrine Maidens to come out to welcome me. Lady Rosemine, greetings everyone. Nora and the other former orphans of Haas had all grown a lot since the last time I saw them. They were fully used to the orphanage wit now and didn't seem shrouded with any regret whatsoever. Nora, you took the initiative in helping with Lily's child, correct? I asked. None in the orphanage knew much about births, and I am told that your guidance was essential. I did not have much experience myself, she replied. Rather, it was the women of Haas who truly helped. I was filled with relief when the child was born safely. Is the child doing well? Is he growing bigger? Martha asked timidly. I nodded with a smile. He had been quite energetic in the dining hall when I visited the orphanage. We need eyes on him at all times now that he has started to crawl. He tried crawling all the way over to me, so Lily had to hurriedly stop him. Has anything happened in the monastery? I asked. Yes, we have started a field. The field itself was only as big as a home garden, but they had apparently started growing vegetables. Thor and Rick were heading the operations, and since the area surrounding the monastery was rich with mana, it gave excellent yields. It is good that you have found more to do, I said. However, take care not to focus so much on farming that you grow distant from printing and the paper-making. Of course. After supplying mana to the face stone in the chapel, I made my way to my room, changed, and then went to eat dinner. Nobles, grey priests, and soldiers all ate together here, albeit at separate tables. You may find the manners of the soldiers to be unpleasant, Angelica, but please overlook them for tonight. Understood. After eating the food that Fran and Monica had served me, I moved to the table where the soldiers were beginning to lounge after finishing their own meals. There was something I needed to speak to them about. Dad noticed me first and straightened his back while Fran prepared a chair for me at once so that I could sit down. Lady Rosemine, the soldier said, hurriedly moving to kneel. I instructed them to sit back down before sitting in the chair now provided for me. I have news, as well as a request for you and all the other soldiers, I said. What might that be? They asked, leaning forward. I prefaced my answer by saying that I was sure the knights had informed them already, and then explained that the creation magic was soon going to be performed. In short, there will be contracts signed during the Archduke Conference at the end of spring. Merchants from other duchies are going to be coming to Ehrenfest, and the lower city will be remodeled for cleanliness before then. I felt it was fairly sudden, but now I understand why it is happening, Dad said, nodding at my explanation and speaking politely as soldiers were trained to do. The soldiers had apparently been told about the upcoming creation and instructed to provide assistance for adjusting the populace to the new rules, but they hadn't been told why it was happening or what modifications were due to take place. If this remodeling does not beautify the lower city to the standards of other duchies, I answered, we will need to perform large-scale remodeling that will flip the entire lower city on its head. The entire lower city, the soldiers asked, exchanging confused glances. I looked at Dad head-on. The entire city would be remodeled with a large-scale spell, in which case only the ivory stone buildings made with the Archduke's mana would remain. The wooden parts where most live would all vanish. What? The soldiers all inhaled sharply, their eyes wide. It came as no surprise that they were so taken aback. They themselves lived in the wooden parts of the lower city's buildings. It is actually much simpler to design blueprints for changing the entire lower city rather than just the streets. These plans were only changed to minimize the impact on homes because I personally requested it. It was impossible for commoners to overturn the decision of nobles. Things often ended up being finished before they even knew they were happening. My dad swallowed, knowing well how tyrannical nobles were. Instead, we'll be remodeling the streets and the ground beneath them, I explained. When we are done, we will need the help of citizens to make the changes stick and prevent the need for more drastic measures. I would like to ask for all of your assistance in teaching those of the lower city the dangers involved here. Rule 1 was to either stay in one's home or outside of the city entirely on the day of the remodeling. Rule 2 was to lock one's doors and windows tightly and to keep them locked until word came that the remodeling was complete. Rule 3 was to assume that anything left on the street would be gone for good. Rule 4 was to dispose of all garbage and waste in designated spots following the remodeling so as to keep the lower city clean, and Rule 5 was to keep Rule 4 in mind and make sure that one's neighbors stayed on track too. As I listed off all the warnings I could think of, Dad and the soldiers listened with serious expressions, committing them to memory. The look in their eyes made me feel like everything was going to be fine in their hands. The fate of countless homes in the lower city rests on your shoulders. Please work together to protect what you have, I concluded. We are deeply grateful for your consideration, Lady Rosemine. I will protect our homes with all that I have, Dad said, tapping his left chest with his right fist. The other soldiers did the same, tapping their left chest twice, and I returned the salute with a smile. The next morning, Dad and the others prepared to leave for Ehrenfest with the carriage of grave priests. Gunter, everyone, I trust my priest to you once again, I said. We will convey what you have told us to the others. Rest well, Lady Rosemine. I delivered the extra payments to the soldiers, like always, and then saw the carriage off. I would need to leave for the next winter mansion post-haste. Gil, Hugo, you may depart for your rest stop for tonight. Yes, Lady Rosemine. Once the carriage of my belongings had left, I looked over the grave priests and shrine maidens from the monastery who had come to watch me go. During the 2 years I slept, I am pleased to see you have all cooperated with the people of Haas and formed strong bonds. This is a splendid feat that not even the Ehrenfest Temple has managed to accomplish yet. I ask that you continue your excellent efforts, I said. I then turned my attention to the field. And Thor, please do tell me if you farm any especially delicious vegetables. I will come try them for myself. Thor grinned proudly and agreed, saying that he'll give me the best vegetables. I truly was looking forward to when the harvest came. Everyone knelt to see me off, after which I climbed into Leslie and headed to my next destination. From there, spring prayer ended without incident. Each winter mansion welcomed me with heated excitement, but that was about it. It was quite easy this year since I was used to doing 4 times as much while traveling all throughout the Central District with Ferdinand. I stretched, content that there was nothing left to do but return to the temple. I had only needed to chug 2 of Ferdinand's kindness-infused potions this time, so I didn't even feel as though I had been pushing myself. Doing only a part of the duchy is so much easier, I mused aloud. I need to thank Charlotte and Wilfrid. Lady Rosemine, you must not forget to thank the High Priest as well, Fran said, fixing me with a sharp look. I returned a polite smile. I hadn't forgotten to. I just considered it much less of a priority because it's normally his job to do that. Charlotte and Wilfrid don't have to do that. But they chose to, so she's going to thank them, obviously because the High Priest, like I said, is supposed to be doing that. It's the High Priest and the High Bishop that normally... and all the other blue priests that... it's normally the job of the temple to do that, essentially. My gratitude for him lies elsewhere, I said. The High Priest deserves even greater thanks for making me such wondrous potions. I see. Since we were traveling by High Beast, Fran and I were the first to return to the temple, carrying the chalice with us. Gil, Hugo, and several others were going to take an extra day since they were returning by carriage to Haas, where they would stay the night before coming back to the temple. They will most likely be returning tomorrow afternoon. Ordinance, I said, using the ordinance face stone I was borrowing from Ferdinand to inform him of my return. This is Rosemine speaking. I'll be reaching the temple at 4th bell, so go ahead and inform Charlotte for me. There was only one primary chalice, the divine instrument, so we were taking turns going through the central district. I had gone first since it was known that I would need to take a break. Next up was Charlotte, then Wilfrid, and then Ferdinand. I arrived at the temple front gate as scheduled, whereupon I found Charlotte waiting in blue ceremonial robes alongside a chain of carriages. And so I have returned, I said. Welcome back, sister. How are you feeling? Thanks to Wilfrid and your help, I completed my spring prayer duties without falling ill. I imagine this is going to be difficult for you, but you have my gratitude. The chalice was handed to Ferdinand's attendants, who would be accompanying Charlotte on her trip. Charlotte watched him cradle the precious divine instrument and then climb into the carriage, which she too would soon be getting into. She would perform the ceremony at the closest winter mansion in the south before turning in for the night. Well then, I suppose I must depart, Charlotte said. I wouldn't want to arrive too late. Indeed, farewell, everyone. Take good care of Charlotte. After seeing Charlotte off, I turned to go to my room, only for Ferdinand to grab my arm and jerk my head up. Hey, what are you doing? I exclaimed. You've just returned from spring prayer, but you look healthier than you expected. I managed to drink only a few potions thanks to the short amount of ground I needed to cover. It's just nice how little work we each have when we share the job. Indeed. However, you still want to spend the afternoon in bed, Ferdinand said, and so, as instructed, I spent the rest of my day rolling around in bed with a book in hand. I returned to my normal life the next day, spending my mornings practicing whirling and the harpspiel and then helping Ferdinand with his work. Plus, on days when I didn't have any plans involving the orphanage or the workshop, or what have you, I also attended Professor Ferdinand's brewing lessons. Oh dear. He started with the basic potion making that knights regularly used, with his aim being for me to at least be able to make my own potions by the end. It was exactly the kind of protectiveness I could appreciate. But my precious reading time, how I wish to read books. I continued brewing despite the pain in my heart, and soon learned to make the most basic and fundamental rejuvenation potion there was. It was a recipe that was also taught at the Royal Academy, and it didn't taste bad at all. It was completely drinkable, but didn't really do anything. Not only was it weak and slow to take effect, but I was so used to the special brew that Ferdinand usually made that it seemed almost entirely useless in comparison. Do not consider yourself on equal terms with your classmates who have not obtained an absurd amount of mana through ridiculous amounts of compression. Rejuvenation potions on this level are more than enough for an average apprentice. They sell like hotcakes to the knights apprentices Lord Bonifacius is training. Those who have neither the time nor energy to gather ingredients and brew potions themselves, Ferdinand told me with a grin. It seemed that making them had proven to be a good source of money for him during his days in the Royal Academy. But wouldn't the potions you brew sell for more than those simple ones? No, they are too expensive to be profitable. The ingredients themselves are rare and difficult to gather, and the brewing recipe is much more complicated. They are not of a price that apprentices could easily afford. A cold sweat ran down my back as I was informed that the rejuvenation potions I used on a daily basis weren't cheap. Wait, but I use them all the time, don't I? I don't remember ever paying for one. That is fine since you are performing work that more than makes up for their cost. The mana you recover is immediately spent for the duchy's sake as well. Under normal circumstances, Ferdinand would be paying me for the work I did while helping at Third Bell. In fact, the blue priests who had also begun to help him were all getting paid. I was the sole exception. It was something that I never really thought about, since I had always viewed the situation as me helping him rather than working for him. I can't believe he was funneling my pay into financing the potions I drink. I could only hang my head at how severe Ferdinand was. He had given me rejuvenation potions like it was nothing, while at the same time keeping it hidden from me that my own money was being used to pay for them. Okay, think I'm going to end this one off here, and I will see you all next time.